Good morning. Good morning. This is going to be a short panel because I guess I have to stand up the whole time. And I'm not Jack Black, but I thought you might just like to see his name. He was supposed to be here this morning, but we couldn't ask him to call in twice. I'm just looking for the name and the title of the panel. It's been, as you know, I've been playing catch up the whole festival. I'm always like one event behind. It's creative independence in the digital age. How real is it? And the panelists have all been asking me what they should prepare to talk about, and I haven't told them anything. I think the idea behind it, the title as I remember, is that in the so-called digital age, it's becoming less and less expensive to make motion pictures, and people then assume that there would be more creative freedom involved because there's less financial control over the making of motion pictures. And I was just wondering if that's actually the case, because there are other influences besides financial influences that go into deciding what films get made and what films don't. So that's the general direction, but as all you guys know, we never end up talking about what we're supposed to talk about. So I think we'll just start off by, I'd really like panelists to introduce themselves for a variety of reasons, one, not the least of which means I don't have to prepare introductions for them. But so if we could, we'll start with Michael Phillips down at the end and just give us a little history of who you are, and if you want to take this opportunity to say something about Roger, feel free to do so.
I think I'm going to hold my remarks on Roger for the Oslo August 31st screening this afternoon. So briefly, pardon me. Michael Phillips, I'm the film critic of the Chicago Tribune, and I've been coming to Ebertfest all of the last 6 years, except last year, and that's it. I'm a fan as well as a participant.
I'm Feike Santbergen. I'm from Holland. I'm a young filmmaker. I have a short film here, To Music, screened yesterday. I've only done a few short films before, but I was fortunate to did work on 16, 35, and video, so I mean, it might have something to add to the discussion. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joachim Trier. I'm from Norway, half Danish, half Norwegian. I've made 2 feature films, one called Reprise, one called Oslo, August 31st, which will be screened later today. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank the festival for inviting me. I just arrived, so if I say some strange things today, please forgive me. I'm a bit jet lagged. But yes, I'm also curious about what we're going to talk about, so I'll just open my mind to whatever comes up and hope that somehow
Just pretend like you're making a movie.
Exactly. Okay. No, but it's a pleasure being here, so thank you.
Hi, my name is Randy Moore. I'm originally from Illinois. That means anything.
Where?
Lake Bluff, Illinois.
In the Chicago area?
Yeah, it's around Lake Forest and Evanston, Highland Park, that area.
Oh.
I wrote and directed Escape from Tomorrow. It's my first feature film. Been living in LA for about the last 10 years, working as a story editor, and I'm just really excited to be here, and thank you for inviting me in the film.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Ann Hubbell. I am an independent producer. I just started a company for women directors, and I have a film that you can watch now streaming on Netflix called Gaby that I made a year and a half ago for about $150,000 digitally. I also work for Kodak, so I can talk about a few things, I guess. Okay, thanks for having me.
Good morning, I'm Pablo Berger. I'm a writer, director, producer. My film playing here is Blancanieves. It's my second film. My first film is Torremolinos 73. And like Joachim, I arrived last night very, very late. I should have the coffee, like, when, I don't know how you call it, like, but as Nate says, you know, film directing or making movies is improvising, so we'll go with the flow. And one thing, I'm very happy to see so many people here, because when I heard my screening was at 11 o'clock tomorrow, I said, nobody's going to be there. And I hope that some people are going to be there. If it's 11, this is 9 o'clock, and there's so many people, tomorrow 11 could be like a full house.
Yeah, it'll be like midnight in Barcelona. You know.
I'm Spanish time, you know.
Dan?
I'm Dan Aronson. I'm CEO of Fandor. Fandor is a online subscription service for great thought-provoking movies. My story about Roger is that in November I had the idea that a great gift for my employees might be hand-signed copies of Life Itself, and so I asked Roger if he'd do that, and Roger signed 25 copies of the book, and I found out afterwards he was signing them sort of right before he went to the hospital, and it was just an incredibly warm and generous and moving thing.
My name is Roy Abramson. I'm an actor from Los Angeles, not originally from outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm one of the actors in Escape from Tomorrow that Randy directed down there, and I'm not sure why I'm here. I'm the dark horse in this illustrious cast of directors and CEOs and things.
You're here to keep them in line. I think we'll start with Escape from Tomorrow, because that was in part the inspiration for this panel topic. It perhaps, I don't want to insult the other directors on stage, was perhaps the most transgressive film at the festival this year. Randy, you want to talk a little bit about what I'm talking about? Anything, I mean, be careful what you say. You know.
Like the legality of the film, or the production, or
Everything. I mean, it caused quite a stir at Sundance because, because of the way you shot the film.
Sure.
And,
well, we went into to Disney World. I guess it's no secret, and we used tiny, just Canon 5D DSLR cameras, but for months we planned very carefully, because we didn't want it to have a sort of shaky documentary feel. We wanted it to, feel like it was a real. I was thinking David Lean. It didn't turn out quite as. The scope wasn't quite as grand, but it was the digital technology that allowed us to go in there relatively unnoticed and shoot stuff that otherwise we would have never been able to capture.
yeah, and well, have you heard from Disney yet?
We've not yet heard. No, we haven't heard yet from them yet, as of yet.
And do you think your film will achieve distribution?
We have John Sloss at Cinetic, who's working tirelessly to grease the wheels for some sort of distribution. So hopefully, but like I said, we submitted the film blind to Sundance, just sent them a DVD, and somehow it got through the right channels, and we couldn't believe it when we got into there, and then this is just ridiculous that it's made it this far. I mean, this was really, a passion project that was sort of like my field of dreams moment. It didn't make much sense to do, due to the litigious nature of the company that we were kind of raiding, but it was just something that I couldn't get out of my head, and I felt like I was stuck, and I needed to just do this so I could do the next thing, and And that's how it came about. You know, I'd been going to the park for a long time with my father when I was a child, and it meant a lot to me then. And then when I had kids of my own, it sort of took on a whole new meaning, and I sort of felt like his ghost was following me around, and I had trouble separating the two. So for me, there was no other place to do it. It wasn't like I was looking to just, you know, make trouble. Like I felt genuinely that this was where I needed to do it. And it was when the Canon 5Ds came out that I started realizing, like, you know, you can do this. You can actually go around, and we weren't the only people with these cameras. It wasn't like we had some specialized modified camera that just looked like a normal camera. I mean, half the park had the exact same camera, and we were just using it in a different way, you know.
So did you consider it guerrilla filmmaking?
I think it was a hybrid. A lot of people say it was guerrilla. We shot about half of it there and then half of it on sound stages and permitted locations.
You know, this is a very American film in a lot of ways, and I'm sure you did obviously feel the pressure of corporate America upon you. I wonder if the European directors have any sort of similar concerns about, for lack of a better word, corporate or government interference in the process. Pablo?
Yeah, completely, you know, in a way. There are many industries, film industries, but in a way they're very similar, how they work. I'm part of the European film industry. As Joachim, my films have been made in the system, but in the European system. And Blancanieves is my second film. My first film was Torremolinos 73. It had an art house release in the States in 2004, okay? So in Spain, this film was successful, very successful in Spain, you know. The Goyas, which are the Spanish Oscars. I got a Chinese remake. I thought I was James Cameron, the king of the world. No, I really felt my first film, I made it. So I came up with my second project, that is Blancanieves, in 2005. On the first page of the script said, it's a black and white silent film, okay? It took me like, I had the hair like this, black, and I have it white. I used glasses. It took me 9 years to make a film. Why? Because the system didn't want it to support a black and white silent film, and expensive. So I had to do it against the system, because there's in Spain, when we call the system, we call the TV stations. The TV stations can put the budget of maybe 1/3 of the budget. So we had a gap in our budget that we had to find it through other ways. So definitely, you know, we are, in a way, we all have the systems. It's very hard to make films against the system, but if you're willing to lose your hair and just fight for it, you can make it.
I've been working against the system all my life.
Yeah, I can see that. We are like, I see a connection here.
But the more hair you lose, the more battles you've lost. Joachim?
There's this sort of, I can recognize what you're saying. I have an ambivalence when we talk about the system, and this is, I guess, the challenges of making a film in, let's say, a country like Norway, where you pay a lot of tax, and the money, some of the money is allocated through the Department of Culture to create movies. So you're actually making movies off the foundation of the grants that you get. You know, the industry with a small language, imagine, you know, there are about 5 million Norwegians in the world, and to be able to make movies in that language, obviously, it's you know, either you got to make a tremendous box office success, or you need some soft money, as you call it in America, some money that you don't have to give back, basically. So you have the Norwegian Film Institute, and I won't bore you about all the details, but basically the films are made then from sort of 50 to 60% of the budget you're given, but it has to go through a system where you have your scripts read by committees or individuals that then decide, and they are there on a 3 to 4 year basis, and they are supposed to be objective, and it's not always the case. And you know, they're trying to create a system. So on one hand, that works well. I mean, in my case, I was fortunate enough to have when I started wanting to do feature films, I'd studied in England, and I've sort of made films on video since I was a kid. But when I was going to do my first feature film, there was a moment in Norwegian cinema where there had been some quite successful, big sort of local genre movies. And the cultural department and the cultural minister said, well, what we lack is a sort of an auteur wave, like, you know, Denmark has had Lars von Trier and Dreyer, Sweden has had Bergman and Jan Troell. In Norway, we haven't had that. So they were kind of looking for someone to try to be the artist on behalf of Norwegian cinema. And I was fortunate enough to come back from film school, and my script, they believed, had some sort of quality. So I was fortunate enough to make a film supported by the system. So in a way, when we talk about being against or for a system, there's a system operating which is not 100% fair, some people would say, but at least it's trying to emphasize a variety of films that are being made, not only commercial ones.
At least Norway has a Department of Culture.
Yeah. But I will say one thing before I finish this statement. Is sort of the ambivalence is also then about, you know, there is an incredible emphasis at the moment in Norway about then art having to be very varied, quite kind of purposefully. And the irony is, you know, I don't think you can go to a group of artists or a group of creative people and say, well, what we need now is a film about this or that. You know, I think people genuinely have certain stories that they're able to or want to tell, and so at the moment there's a big discussion going on as to how much emphasis there needs to be on, for example, initiatives to try to create films that have strong female lead characters or cultural diversity, things that on a political and social level I think are very important. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of tough to force, you know, there was, for example, someone who suggested that all gender-neutral characters, let's say someone who drives a cab that the lead character gets into, all of them should be female characters. And I'm trying to make somehow realistic movies, and then, you know, if I made a film, then all the characters that drive cabs have to be women, which is not the case in Oslo for some reason that I can't explain, you know. So there's a discussion going on, but I think it's a healthy discussion, and, you know, yeah, films are being made.
Okay. Feike, you want to talk a little bit about Holland and the way young filmmakers can get started
yes.
there?
We also have a system. There's a film fund that basically is the core of the funding system, and then you have the television channels, I'd say a few, and you have to get 3 groups together to get your film funded. Only I haven't yet entered the system, so I'm still looking for a way in, and I guess making short films and hoping them to be screened in several places might help, but it's quite, you know, I can understand the system might work very well, but when you're still outside, it's hard. It's a big castle, and I'm just looking for a way in. You know, probably you have to find a little friend there. Basically, it is. I think there's a lot of politics involved, and Holland is all about. We have the polder system. It's about endlessly discussing, conversing. Everybody gets involved. Everyone gets to say something about the script, about the idea, and I think that kind of changes the real. Authentic character of our filmmakers, because so many people in the system get to say something about their ideas and about their script. So I'm not too positive about the way our system works right now, but at least it's great there is funding, and I haven't heard the term soft money, but I think there is some soft money in Holland, which is great. I hope to get some of that at some point.
Yeah. No, the word soft is very nice, particularly when associated with money. Anne, maybe we start with you to talk about, I mean, is there an American system anymore?
I mean, when I hear you guys talk about how the government works and how those, cultural agencies work, it just sounds like the studio system. I mean, it's basically you're talking to some administrator versus talking to an executive, but I mean, I think that goes on here. In the independent world, I don't know. I think there's the sort of what people call now micro-budget films, which I would say are under, I don't know, $300,000 or $500,000. And that is, I guess, becoming a system. In some ways it's great because a lot of new talent can come up, and in other ways, it's not really great for the industry because people are working for very little money or no money, and that becomes acceptable and a kind of a let's all roll up our sleeves way of life. And it's fine if you do it, you know, once or maybe twice, but when you continue to ask people to work for, you know, $100 a day or something, nobody can really do that. And so I think when this digital incursion happened, that there was this idea that it was going to move out of the sort of upper class, upper middle class, you know, only those people being able to make films and be more egalitarian. But the fact of the matter is, if you're not able to pay people and you aren't subsidized by, you know, something, another job or your family or whatever, it sort of has stayed the same in a way. I know for the film that we made, my producing partner and I, we both wore a bunch of hats. We start to finish, excluding post, took about 8 weeks prep and then 17 days to shoot. We paid our crew $100 a day. I was not paid because I have a day job. When you pay people like that in New York City, most of those kids that are working don't have driver's licenses, so you get to be the driver of the 15-pass van when you're the producer also. Or if I would like lose the coin toss, I would have to drive the production van, which was worse. But so, you know, it's just not, it's not sustainable, I think. And I think that's becoming more and more acceptable in the independent world, which again
there's somebody who's exploiting that situation. And perhaps Michael could tell us a little bit about who those people are.
Well, let me just ask, I want to ask Roy one thing. Does Randy owe you money, Roy?
No, it's funny. You were. I was just thinking about that. Randy. No, he doesn't. He paid and had he paid. I mean, this is a low. In that, I don't know. I guess the budget grew, I suppose, but he paid more than most of those $100 a day films pay, and that is actually. I mean, I'm a father of two, and you know, have a day job, and I was like, because he paid more than that, I'm going to put number, but it was just enough that I went, yeah, I could do this for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, you know, and it really was the deciding point. I've never even talked to Randy about this, but because I was like, wow, he's paying that much more than your average $100 a day movie.
Are you SAG?
Huh?
Are you SAG?
Yeah. Well, I'm also
the Screen Actors Guild.
Yes, SAG is Screen Actors Guild.
Not referring to
although
body parts.
I'm sad too. There's a thing in Screen Actors Guild that's not talked about much, but there's a thing in California called financial core, which if you legally declare financial core, you can actually do non-union too. It's a labor law that says you can't force actors only to work in the union because there's so little work. So actually, although this movie was not done through SAG, because it couldn't be, you know, we were at an illegal location without permits. So that I legally did it because I am that financial core person. I fell on hard times years ago when we first had 2 kids, and I was starting to do, like, you know, a commercial for Bank of Brazil or something, and I was like, well, it's more than they're paying, you know. So anyway, that was the deciding point. But had it been less than that, I wouldn't have been able to do this had he not offered that more money.
I mean, some of this discussion must make a filmmaker from Norway just kind of think, well, what has happened to this country, or was it ever better? I mean, we have a terrible tendency to romanticize artistic poverty all over the world. Like, you must starve to, you know, the phrase passion project, I think, is a very tricky one because it sort of implies a lack of money, and then you start thinking of the semantics. And that means that if you get paid, it's not, your passion's gone? What happened to the middle class in this country, you know? And that's really what we're all striving for, I think. I mean, certainly myself as a critic, you don't respond to anything more strongly than just, you know, pure artistic passion on the screen, but that doesn't come from a lack of money. You know, it comes from being able to do the work you want to do, and if it means getting enough money to pay the actors, or you know, playing ding dong ditch with Disney and shooting on your, you know, that's good because that's going to fuel the project. I guess what I worry that because it is so hard to fund a movie made between $1 million and $7 million, let's say, in this country today. Every filmmaker I talk to, and these are very, very kind of broad appeal mainstream projects. Everything from maybe this is like this is a terrible cliche, but films you might associate with kind of a Sundance hit. The Kids Are All Right, a film I liked. Get Low with Duvall and Bill Murray, and these films took, largely this is because of the recession. These films took 4 or 5 years to raise the money for. And you know, these are stories.
That's actually not that long sometimes, too.
7, 8 film. I mean, you know, and it wasn't like that. You know, I mean the golden years of the '70s when the studios were somehow turning the keys over to the maniacs and everybody. You couldn't, you know, you get movies like Scarecrow being made or The Conversation, and it's unthinkable now to have a studio imprint and studio financing behind it. But I think the question I have when I look at everybody here, as different as everybody's pursuits are, is we have a great sense of creative access to being able to make a film well and cheaply and actually getting it into some distribution stream. The question is, does it simply languish like too many other good films out there that can't quite fight for the attention they deserve?
Well, I think, Dan, you might want to address that
Sure. No,
question.
I think about that a lot. I think about the fact that, you know, one of the reasons I started Fandor was the realization that hey, you know, streaming the Transformers is no more expensive than streaming Vincent. Okay, and so the idea is that there are now the possibilities of actually changing the economics of distribution, and so, you know, I believe that the future holds that people will be able to more effectively choose what they want to see, and so the challenge is, how do we move from where we are now with the kind of incumbent, whether it's distributors or whatever, how do we move towards that future? And there are lots of people who are trying to do things. One of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to make a very transparent payment mechanism for the filmmakers or for the distributors, where in fact the payments have to do with how much of films are seen. This is an example. There are lots of other examples of people who are trying to build different mechanisms, whether it's, you know, Kickstarter to get your films out there, or putting up short films on iTunes or whatever. And, you know, I think that there are many more experiments and many more things that people are trying to do than what they could do in the past. And so I'm not completely sure, you know how it all plays out, but I know that there's more access than there used to be, and I think we have the opportunity to help build the new distribution mechanisms that more match the kinds of funding mechanisms that are necessary for these kinds of movies.
So it seems to me the downside might be, or theoretically, might be that compensation is based on popularity. Now that doesn't work on the front end, or you wouldn't, certainly in Norway, where you have somebody saying to Joachim Trier, you know, give me some of that Carl Dreyer. Not give me some of that Michael Bay.
So Michael, one of the things we try to do is we try to make sure that in fact that we mix it up, that we give people various mechanisms to help discover content, and our goal is actually that lots and lots of our content, lots and lots of our library is seen. Okay, and so we actually work against that popularity, because we're trying to make a broad swath swatch of things, kind of bring them out to people. And so I understand that there is that challenge. It's important to build kind of curation and discovery mechanisms that work against it.
Well, I think we're in a kind of a new Wild West where things still have not settled down. And it looks like it's not going to settle down for quite some time. In terms of distribution, how people see films, whether you watch it streaming on your iPhone or whether you see it in the Virginia Theater on the 65-foot screen. We tend to think the latter is preferable, but there are a lot of people who don't care where they see their movies.
So Nate, I would like to speak to that for a moment, that I think traditionally with theatrical distribution, theaters are great. I love theaters. I go to the Castro in the Bay Area all the time. I love the Virginia. But traditionally, unless you can fill theaters, it doesn't make sense to market a movie. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that in the future there's a continuum of both distribution and consumption mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
Theaters are one, these kinds of things are another. Roku is a third.
Yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not an either or.
Right.
It's not a binary that needs to be broken. But I just want to shift the discussion a little bit now to content and to the influences that unseen or hegemonic forces might have on how you decide what film you want to make. Clearly, Randy, that didn't enter too much into your thought processes, but I mean, there are choices of subject, choices of story structure, questions of how long your film should be. I mean, we saw In the Family yesterday. It was 3 hours long, and it worked beautifully at 3 hours, So for the filmmakers here, sometimes you don't even know what's going through your mind when you're deciding what film or what kind of film you're going to make. Are there any unseen pressures upon you to beyond what Joachim was talking about in Norway? Pablo? Yeah.
Well, in my case, as I explained at the introduction, not at all. That's why it was 8 years. It's just when I write, I'm a romantic. I'm just a storyteller. I love to tell stories. I have the same passion of making movies since when I was 18, making Super 8s. So every time I start writing a script, I just get in front of my computer. I almost get like Linda Blair, like channeling. I just go, and I just have images. And for me, my language is the language of images and how I order. Of course, because I'm a storyteller, I put a structure. I don't do just surrealistic writing and just I give it to you to the audience. No, I consider the audience like they're my children. I'm telling them a tale. But the origin is always visual images, and I make films for myself. I put myself there where you are, and I see what is the film I want to see. And I just looking forward that there's a group of people that connect with the way I see films. And so in my sense, as I said, up to now, from my first feature to my short films, I haven't had the influences of the system, but that's why I have made so few films. But it's okay, this is kind of like, not that I have a goal of becoming like a director that only makes a movie every 9 years, but that's where the system has put me in.
But in terms of Spain's history, for example, of censorship and control, I mean, is any of that sitting in the back of your head?
No, not at all. But on the other hand, it's just like, I know if I don't follow the rules, in a way, there's like in Norway, we have a system that funds films, there's TVs, there's all these kind of, that they want to repeat past formulas. That's something that I really think that you guys and the directors, we are much more connected than the producers or the distributors or the exhibitors with you. Because in a way, you guys are ahead. Some people look down at you, not the directors. But producers, distributors, and the people that fund movies, they look down at you. So we really, as a director, I always try to jump the system, but it's impossible. So that's why if you really go against the system, most of the people, they just throw the towel. You know, I just think that you just have to fight until you get the movie made.
The irony, of course, is you went against the system by going back to the oldest formula of the silent film. But that's something else. Joachim, do you want to talk a little bit about where you,
Yeah.
I mean, if there's anything that puts blinders on you or just locks
I mean,
your
you know,
brain
we
down?
could go very sort of psychoanalytically into this and start talking about what cultural references prohibit us from telling certain stories or something. But I think, you know, to be honest, financially, I feel that I'm very privileged and free in being able to pretty much do the stories I want to tell. I have Final Cut. I also decided long ago that I'm not doing movies that I don't want to do. You know, I'm not a strategic director. I'm not good enough. I try to do the stuff that I love and I want to show people and that I ideally would love to see in the movie theaters myself. But I think there's something interesting going on if I'm understanding your question correctly, about how dramaturgy is being challenged from various places. So at the moment, what do we do with the feature film? A feature film for me, you know, should ideally be seen in a cinema. I love going to the movies. I love the idea of a dark, contemplative space where most people who are polite at least turn off their cell phones and sit in silence. And it's almost a meditative state that you get into with a movie. And that's quite a sort of a rare space in our lives these days, right? So that's worth fighting for, I think, in itself. It's also a place where you can see a close-up in a different way. You never see a human eye at the scale that you do unless you're probably in, you know, Times Square and watch some sort of a big ad campaign, or in a movie theater. You know, in a movie theater you can tell stories with that. You can't see an eye on TV in the same way. People say close-ups are for television. I disagree. I think close-ups in the movies is a unique thing you can only do in that space, right? So there's a lot of things going on that's unique and worth fighting for and preserving. But at the same time, people are drawn to 3 one-minute YouTube clips. I enjoy them as well. That's interesting. On the other hand, we enjoy long TV series that are wonderfully exploring character dynamics, like The Wire, for example. You know, I think it's a masterpiece. It's wonderful. It's sociologically and psychologically interesting. And you couldn't quite do that in a movie either. So we need to ask ourselves, what's that space in between the YouTube clip and the HBO series at the moment? And how do we sort of in terms of dramaturgy, when I use that word, I mean structure of story, pacing, emotional experience, thematic treatment. How do we do that specifically in a movie theater today? And, you know, we should keep being progressive. I mean, a lot of people have said that feature films have not started yet exploring the possibilities of storytelling. I mean, I kind of disagree. I think there's a lot of good stuff being done in movies, but I think there's still stuff to be done. There's still images to be made. You know, I'm kind of bored when people talk about the death of movies. I think it's a space that we're going to keep going to for a long time. At the same time, hey, you know, yeah. But at the same time, I also want to say that I don't think this should stop the way that we can distribute differently. And I'm you know, a friend of mine who's a music producer, and in the music industry, they've probably felt the pressures of how do we make money off different structures of selling the stuff we make for a longer time than movies. He called me, this guy, the manager. You know, he used to be the guy who called me and said, make a pop promo or a music video for my band, and suddenly that didn't make money for him, and now he's trying to get all the artists he represents onto TV shows or reality shows or something. I mean, you know, their structures are changing. And he suddenly called me one day, and he hasn't been that interested in my films as I think he find them rather sort of artistic and not that interesting. But he called me and said, Joachim, are you aware that one of your movies is you know, on this Pirate Bay or, you know, like torrent download site where I won't make any money, but it's one of the top films being downloaded at the moment. Wow, you're a hit, man. You know, I was like, wow, am I? Okay. You know, that was news to me. And obviously this is what we experience. And once in a while, you know, that a lot of people steal our movies, and we're kind of pervertedly happy because at least someone's watching them, and they're watching them differently on an iPhone. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm just really grateful if people watch my stuff. So we need to have 2 thoughts in our head at once here, I think. How to be able to make a living off good distribution digitally, at the same time keep fighting for the big screen. I still shoot on film. I'm going on set this fall, and the plan is to shoot on 35. So
Will it be a Kodak film?
Kodak, yes.
It's the only one left.
Keep going.
Yeah, we're going, don't worry.
I don't think we'll get into film versus digital, but
I'll speak from a producer standpoint to this, because last week I was at another festival and we were meeting with a filmmaker, and she asked us, well, what do you how important is it, marketing and recoupment in your decision making? And we just said, it's like 50-50 with story and how much we like the movie, because we have investors that we have to be responsible to. We have to know how it's going to get out there. And if you're working at these small budgets, you have to be thinking about your distribution path or how people would be watching your work. And so in order for us to commit to something and raise money for something, we have to be able to show, why this is going to make money. In the U.S., we were lucky that Beast of the Southern Wild was such a huge hit last year, because it proved that art cinema can really catch on and be successful. But that's what you have to tell people, is that especially equity investors, which is what most independent filmmakers are dealing with in the United States. You need to tell them how it's going to work, and whether it's a combination of, for instance. A typical situation might be equity, maybe a small grant, some donations through a 501c3 fiscal sponsor, as well as like a Kickstarter campaign or some crowdsourcing, and then a state incentive. So you can cobble all that stuff together and kind of make something, and then only have to recoup maybe 70% of that. If you can do that math while you're thinking about who you're casting, what else is going on, it's just a lot has to go into it. Earlier this week, we were meeting with a studio head in New York, and he was saying that, to your point about the under 1 million or over, I would say like 20 even. And he was saying, that they had money for the sort of $650,000 to $750,000 movies, because they had a model where they could do day and date releasing to VOD, video on demand, as well as theatrical in some cities. And in that model, you can make a film for not very much money, and know that there are studios, they know how much they can recoup. And so, unfortunately, you do have to think about that. I mean, I've got plenty of projects that I think are really amazing and have been sitting around for, I don't know, 6 years, Nate?
Yeah.
And just can't find the backing for them. I've got a project that has an Academy Award-winning actress and an Academy Award-nominated actress attached as two leads. They happen to be African American. We had a meeting at a studio, and they're all about foreign sales. And the executive said to us, "Do you know how much foreign sales, worth these people have?" And we were like, "No." And he was like, "Zero money." And I was like, "Well, wow, really?"
Yeah.
Because if you just have people talking and not shooting, it's very hard.
The term creative producer has taken on a completely new meaning, and it has to do with everything that Anne's just talked
Yeah,
about.
you have to be financially creative as well.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't, creative producing means being able to cobble together money to make a movie. But Michael, I mean, you see a lot of movies. Have you seen any kind of direction in terms of breaking the sort of Hollywood mold of three-act storytelling? I mean,
I just came from, I used to write a lot about theater in the earlier part of my life, and I was working on an arts journalism project at the Humana Festival for New American Plays, right? Anybody been there? Down there? And it does strike me that it's not, a lot of writers are loath to enter this sort of script or play development process, because while it's not censorship, you tend to get the edges rounded off one too many passes through Sundance Lab, or that you have to watch out for that. You have to watch out for this sort of advice by committee, and you're getting paid to work on your material and get it into filming shape, whatever shape is you're determining. But you have to be very careful about not sliding into the middle of acceptability. Okay, well, this is it's a little strange, but it's okay. This structurally, I was trying too much, so now I'm going to kind of straighten it out, and suddenly it becomes 1953, and Playhouse 90. And I think the last frontier, especially in American audiences, is playing with form. I mean, we'll put up with abstract expressionism in visual arts. We'll listen to all kinds of atonal music, and we will. A lot of people get very nervous if you get outside the strictures of realism and straightforward linear storytelling. Now, I'm not saying I'm advocating for a revolution that way, but I think the best, even a film is as accessible as Reprise, Joachim's first feature, the correct first feature-length film. I mean, that's playing with form and structure and time, in juggling time and flash forwards and flashbacks. I haven't seen it for a while, in a way that's daunting for some people, but it's really exhilarating because it's so beautifully done. And not every film, not every story would benefit from being told that way, but I guess I always respond as a moviegoer. I always really thrill to finding anybody, any film whose participants have figured out a way to make it seem like it is the first time a story has been told this way, even if it's just straightforward meat and potatoes realism, because it works. It's fully invested, and then you don't get that air of here's the same old formula we follow because it'll help with the funding. And I'm not dismissing the importance of funding because
no, but I was going to say I think we're always also looking for the audacious, and when you look at who are some of our top American directors, at least they all started with films that did play with form. Darren Aronofsky with Pi. I mean, Quentin Tarantino's still doing that. Spike Lee. I mean, you can go down the list and see that these people started outside of the box, and now they've kind of moved into the box, but they're still pushing at the edges to some extent. But
yeah, but a lot of people still, when they get in that box, enjoy the comforts of the box.
Sure.
And I was going to say, I mean, part of Roger's mission always has been, and why he will review a small independent film or an international film with the same space and the same exposure that he gives to big Hollywood studios, is it's an educational process to get people used to looking at something different and to be eager to see something new.
And for yourself too. I mean, I love. There's nothing better than, and then I'll shut up. There's nothing better than really being kind of like, really kind of discombobulated by a movie, and then you have to figure out what is the language? How am I going to describe this to people, and how am I going to kind of figure out why I responded to it the way I did, and that it's a different kind of writing because it's more explanatory and also interpretive, but that's proof that you're dealing with a filmmaker and a screenwriter and a whole team behind him that didn't sign some sort of objectivity clause, you know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's just the most subjective medium in the history of anything, and if I don't sense, you want to sense the people behind it wrestling with it. You don't want to sense that nobody in particular made that movie. Do you know what I mean? I mean, a lot of movies are made in a way that nobody in particular made it.
Yeah,
It's
Roy,
okay, maybe okay, but you know.
Ask Roy, as an actor, you probably read an awful lot of scripts. I mean, what is it?
No, I wish I did. I'm not one of those actors who has a pile of scripts on his desk, unfortunately. But anyway, go on. Yeah.
No, I was, assuming that you read a lot of scripts that aren't sent to you. What do you
Empty
look
mailbox.
for?
Yeah.
I mean, not so much. I mean, what do you? Not that you have obviously you take work. But what is it that you really like to do?
Well,
how do you
there's
see
a
your
story.
role in the process? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, what I like, basically, in actors now, there is. You're talking about there's no middle. Like the movies you mentioned, which are oddly two of my favorites, Conversation and Scarecrow, which I saw when I was about 13. I think I saw those movies, or something like that.
This explains your brooding nature, yes. It explains your brooding nature, because
Yeah.
so many of those films in the 70s were kind of just not,
very-
we're really not afraid to kind of
Yeah.
land on this very bittersweet, open-ended
Yes,
note. And
they end on sad, dark notes, and I like that. Anyway, so I was bemoaning the fact that there are not many movies like that anymore. There is not a middle-class actor anymore in Los Angeles. There used to be guys that could go do series or do TV shows. Because of reality television, there's like, I don't know what the percentage is, but half as many, there are half as many jobs for actors now. So there is no, and it's all about a star system, getting a star in your movie. I was thinking about In the Family yesterday, and these wonderful actors, these two guys that are so fantastic. I kept poking my co-star who's back there in our movie, saying, God, these guys are amazing. That guy Patrick, I don't think he would ever, he's probably fighting for any little scrap role he can get. He will never be seen on many things. What's happened is that there is a scale plus 10 actor now who, the breakdowns will come out for feature films, and you'll see these roles play scale plus 10. You will get very big actors willing to do a minimum wage job now, because you just see the pool is shrinking. It's like the 1%. There's the 1% or the 0.001% at the top that you see constantly in every single movie and every single TV show now. And then there's everyone else.
what is Scale Plus 10 typically?
Scale plus 10, I think, is like, I don't know, $700 or $800 a day or something, which sounds like a lot, but you got to pay for going to 100 auditions to get that one day of work.
And you don't work,
you don't work
like Anne's film was 17 days of shooting.
Yeah, you're lucky
and
if you
then
get a
might
day.
not work for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
We're going to ask the audience for some questions, but you can continue talking while they the audience members file to the microphone to ask any questions you want. But continue with what you were saying.
I was just saying, it's very difficult to find work. I mean, I did a day on a series last year that Fran Drescher does on some cable station, and I got a residual in the mail. And this was kind of forced me to. My wife gave me the look when I got the check. The check was for like $700, and I thought, oh great, it ran again. It ran the second time. I'll get, after taxes, about half of that maybe. And then I looked on the pay stub and it said for runs number 2 through 15. And then I figured out, after paying an agent and a manager and taxes, I'm getting about $23 every time that co-star on an after a union show. I'm getting 23. I'm like, the craft service guy's getting way more than me. And I looked at my wife, and she looked at me, and was just like, time to get a job, a real job. That's personal, but so I did. But I went and got a job. But I realized I couldn't make it even if I was getting work. I couldn't make it. So, but when a movie like Randy's came along, it was so different and so strange, and I couldn't figure it out. That's what interested me. And I realized he wasn't trying to. It really has nothing to do with punking Disneyland or Disney World or anything. It was just a very different, dark story, and I felt it was, and like I said, he paid enough that it was worth it for me to spend 6 weeks on this. So, anyway, that's the actor's point of view, which is depressing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's that same point of view goes across the industry. It's not just actors that have these problems. It's crew. It's people like Randy wants to make something independent, something different. Are there any questions? Surely somebody has some questions. Okay.
This question's for anyone. I think one of the things I absolutely love about this festival is seeing a film that, would have so much trouble with distribution, trouble getting people in the theater, and seeing it in a packed house, seeing In the Family for 3 hours, having people fully invested for 3 hours. It's just, you will never get that like on demand, or I don't care how big your home theater is. But I'm wondering, with all of the different modes of distribution that you get through digital means, do you feel like there's something, do you feel just the whole process of embracing a film is changing, or do you feel like there's something lacking in how people are experiencing films now, and do you feel like the entire, like the theater experience itself will one day be gone? Because I don't think film's ever going to die, but I'm wondering if the actual theater experience is something that'll be a thing of the past. I don't know.
Friends of mine who have 2 kids call me up a year after I premiered in the cinema and say, I finally saw your film on VOD and I like it. You know, that's changed.
Sure.
So,
I don't
different people can access
I
it.
don't think it's going to go away. I mean, I think people have been collecting and listening to stories since, you know, there were more than one person.
Sure.
I think it's changing, but I don't think that it'll go away. And you guys are lucky here to have a great art house cinema. Most of this country, and probably many other places, people don't actually have theatrical access to these films. And that may be changing as well. There's new companies starting that can bring films in for like 1 or 2 days if you can get a house together. And I think that kind of, that, you know, hopefully can catch on, but a lot of people just don't have theatrical access.
So Anne, I'd like to mention that with the rise of other companies like Tug,
Yeah.
that basically, you know what Tug is? Tug is basically you get a community together to see a film. So you want to have a film show at a theater, and there's an email that goes out, and people sign up. And so you have a pre-selected audience that shows up.
Yeah,
And-
there's
and so
another site called Gather that does the same thing
Right.
too. Yeah.
So I think that it's very easy to bemoan based on what we see going on, that things are just getting worse. But I think there are the opportunity for things to get better. And so all of our challenges is as people who are creating, distributing, watching, all of our challenges to try to figure out how to help each other and support the infrastructure.
I mean, we're already doing things like from the beginning of a film, we're blogging on set, we're using social media to reach out and create an audience and awareness, even from before the films are start production, so that, if you're, in your town, maybe, and the way that works is that those, you get 40 people to pledge $20 each. And once you reach a certain amount, the theater will say, yes, it's worth us to show it. And then you all go and make a night of it. And so we're trying to, create community while we're making films for that community at the same time. And it's just, a lot of different hats to wear.
We're trying to fill a vacuum that exists because of the changes in technology, but also because of, lack of support of the arts in general in this country. And I think that's a real issue. I'm on the board of an art cinema in Athens, Georgia, and the executive director said, "Oh, we got to raise money to go digital," and everybody has to pick a film that they want to show on the board, get 100 people, 100 of their friends to come and pay $100 to see this one movie, and then we'll do that 15 times and we'll have enough money to. I said, I don't know 100 people, particularly not 100 people that have $100. I mean, but
Or 1,500.
yeah. So, I mean, I'm optimistic. All the panel members seem to be optimistic that there's enough creativity and imagination out there that this vacuum will be filled and there will be new innovative forms that come forward, but it still feels like, the ground has been pulled out from under us in some way. And, we have another question. I should stop talking.
Do you also feel that some of the smaller screens are being taken up by really popular films that kind of are going to the local theater and the art theater? And so they're looking for films more like that, because in our hometown, even though we have a great place, oftentimes it's films that are more popular, even though they're independent films. And some of the other films that I'd like to see there aren't playing there because they can't make as much money.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of art houses are going the route of second-run houses, but they're second-run houses for so-called art films or good films like Argo and Silver Linings Playbook. I mean, how many times I have to see those films? you know, you want to see Joachim's film or Pablo's film. I mean, that's what these theaters are supposed to be for. And neither of those films will ever come to Athens, Georgia, I fear. And that's a loss.
Nick, can I make a plea to the audience?
Sure.
And that is, you know, we mentioned tug and gather, and I think that I think that people now have the opportunity to be much more patrons of the arts than they used to. There's more direct access. If you look at the amount of money that's going through things like Kickstarter, I think that if you want films that you like to see play at your art house theater, find out about these systems. Take a stance, and I think there's an opportunity. And I think if you can do it successfully, then you should tell everyone you know to do the same thing.
Also, I think it really helps even in theaters that are trying to make more money if individually you go in, like coming to places like this and seeing the films, then going to your local theater and asking for them to bring it there, because they have done that a few times. I also wanted to ask Randy Moore, where did you get your money to make your film?
Well, the budget started off pretty small, so a lot of it was out of my own pocket, and then as it grew, we went over, I think, 3 times what we were supposed to shoot at. Friends and family came to help out as I was having a nervous breakdown. I was 215 pounds when I started making the movie, and at the end I was 168 pounds.
So you should write a diet
I've gained
book.
some of it back, but it was a harrowing experience.
Came out of the food budget. The less he ate, the more he had to make the film.
May I ask one more question? Has anyone seen the television series called Borgen?
Yeah.
Because Borgen,
Morgan?
Borgen,
Yes,
B-O-R-G-E-N.
the Danish
The
series.
Danish one.
Yes.
Oh, Morgan, yes.
It's excellent, and I think that things like that, as you say, branch out, help to open people up to things like foreign films. Because it was shown online free, and then you could buy it, and we bought it, so.
I mean, I think TV is that space that has become that space we're talking about between the $1 and $20 million movie. You know, HBO is doing these films that essentially might have been a theatrical movie at one point, and the quality of work and the themes that people are exploring on television have changed a lot.
Yeah, television. I
Yeah.
mean, the best writing in this country is now on television, but unfortunately, HBO only makes half a dozen of those films a year at most.
And they're very specific in what they're looking for.
Yeah. Question.
Last night after In the Family, I was reading an interview with Patrick Wang, and there was a question addressed to him sort of about his career now in the film industry, and he responded in a way, I'm not direct quote, but he enjoys his peripatetic lifestyle. And I was wondering if you guys think if there's room for someone in the film industry who kind of uses it as a one-time medium rather than putting themselves in the system, would they be able to reach audiences who are in the system?
That's a very good question. One of the panelists should answer.
I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I'll answer it. Especially in the documentary world, that happens. People get something that they're really passionate about, a story they need to tell, experience they've had. I think that happens there more than in the narrative world.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, I mean, just to take that up a step or down a step, a lot of artists work in multiple media, and they have a story they want to tell, and it might to them work better as a painting, as a poem, as a movie, and so they just choose whatever medium works for them. But I think Anne's right. A lot of, I mean, Patrick came out of I guess he went to MIT, and then but he was always interested in theater, and worked a lot on the stage, and this was his first. And you could tell because of the way the picture was shot. I mean, the lockdown camera, the construction of the frame, and everything depended on the actors. And you were allowed to look wherever you wanted to look. It was a very open, invitational kind of movie. And But I think, you know, the thing about the motion picture business is once you make a movie, it's like you've been bitten by a bug or taken over by a virus. You can't do anything else. You just want to make movies. Like Roy wants to be an actor. I mean, well, once you get into this so-called system, you can't get out of it.
So so am I to understand that it's a virus that leads to weight loss and hopefully
And poverty, yeah.
Another question. Hi.
Hi, my question is for Feike. I'd like to know how you raise money for your short films.
That's a good question. We had very little money. Nobody was paid on my films. Well, especially the film that I made with Sophie, that is screening here. We had no money, literally no money at all. But that was just a spontaneous explosion of filmmaking. But the other shorts, we had some money that came from institutions that were somehow related to the topic that the film was on. For instance, my last film dealt with Alzheimer's, so there were like institutions for that, and they put in a little bit of money, and then I present my film there. But it's still, I mean, I haven't been able to pay anyone ever in my life, but I have very loyal friends that, you know, gather and make beautiful things. So yeah, I guess that's it. That's how I do it.
And that is a problem with, thank you, with, like, for example, if you're a documentary filmmaker, your funding is from organizations that give you grants, that are looking for films that deal with social issues of one kind or another. And if you want to make a movie, a documentary about the arts, for example, you have a hard time getting grant money from those institutions.
That wasn't strategic, though. My choice of topic wasn't strategic. It just ended up to be like that.
Okay.
Because I think, in general, what I find very interesting here is that somehow the way this discussion is going about, it seems that somewhere out there is a lot of money. Some people have that money, and we're all plotting to get it, because I think we agree that just good films should be made, and I really think that filmmakers should just come up with whatever they want to make, and you know, concentrate on what their dreams are and how they should do it, and then the people who have money should realize that these films should be funded. So a discussion like this should really be held with the people with the money sitting there, you know, and then...
Well, that's who these people are.
Yeah.
That's great.
It is in the aggregate. In the aggregate, it certainly is.
No, I mean, how many of you have given money to a Kickstarter campaign, for example?
Wow, that's
Wow.
good. Thank you.
That's,
I want to say one other thing. I was having a conversation with another producer the other day, and we were talking about the role of the investor and including investors more. And now that people are understanding from Kickstarter and other opportunities like that, I know that our investors tend to want to be involved, you know, and a lot of times some of the best notes that we've ever gotten on scripts are from investors. And so I think I feel like depending on who you know you're dealing with, if it's an individual, you do have to see what that person wants to get out of it. You know, if it's just a warm fuzzy that you help somebody make a movie, that's great, and you want a tax write-off. But you know, there are various reasons that people get involved, and I think a lot of people tend to, you know, look at, you know, be wolves and look at investors as lambs, and it's just, that's silly, you know.
yeah, no, they're individuals, and a lot of people support particular filmmakers because they just believe in them, and they're not in it to make money necessarily. They're in it because they believe in a particular person and that person's talent. Question.
When I came to the mic, I thought my remark was going to be tangential, but with these last three comments, it's really on target. And it is that it seems to me that the way to change things is to change the investors and the people you go after. And I'm thinking of women as a group, particularly with you, Anne, that women are doing more and more investing. In fact, in many areas, they're the major holders, but very rarely in things of this kind. And as I think about it, nobody's ever asked me for money to make a film.
Can I have some money?
And I am not a target, right? But as an example, if I lived in Athens, Georgia, I would come and bring 10 friends for $100 each, because I would believe in that. If I might have to know more about it, and I'm not going to move to Athens, Georgia, but I think that the potential is there. But the other thing I'm thinking back to is a lot of this is about channeling, not in the Shirley MacLaine sense, but I look at alumni groups, for example, and the business alumni have a pub crawl, and meanwhile, the arts and sciences alumni are listening to a lecture about Plato. None of them is doing anything, this is speaking very broadly, but nothing about a current culture. And the business people very often are hungry for that. They just don't know that they are. And nobody reaches out to say to them, have you ever thought about this kind of thing as an investment, or going to a movie that is not Argo, et cetera? But, and you know, when I say nobody does that, obviously there are some places that do that, but not enough. But women very often make that difference, and I think that's where much of the future could lie.
Yeah, that's an important thing. I mean, interestingly, you should say that, because I just tried to raise some money through a Kickstarter campaign to be directed toward the alumni of the University of Georgia. You know, the foundations have giant lists of graduates, and they always appeal to them for money. And so I sought permission from the University of Georgia Foundation to actually use Kickstarter as a mechanism to reach, to send an email to 20,000 alumni. And I could not get that permission, because it's a very closely guarded group of people. And the idea of a Kickstarter campaign to a university foundation is like, you know, speaking some language from another planet. But it looks like, unfortunately, we've run out of time, because we have another panel starting in 7 minutes. So please give a big round of applause for our panelists. And know that Joachim's film will screen at 1 o'clock today, followed by The Ballad of Narayama, a Japanese film. And Julia with Tilda Swinton is our film this evening. Thank you.